Okay, we're recording. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Céline Vadam, and we're here with us for a coffee break with the Hospitality Think Tank. And today we are talking about what does it mean to and take to build sustainable hotels. And we're lucky to have with us our beautiful think tank members, and we have some hoteliers in the place, some investor and operator, as well as some architects. So I think we will be like nicely covered for that topic. And Happy New Year, everyone. Really happy to see like how you're responding to the think tank coffee break. It's great to see that everybody's really interested in it. And yeah, I'll let everybody introduce themselves and we can get started on this topic. Ilton,
Right
you want
here.
to start? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hilton. I am the general manager of two properties in northern Vietnam under the Banyan Tree Group. I've been in the hospitality industry for many years with an immense passion in sustainability and well-being. So very happy to be here this evening. Excited to have this conversation with my colleagues, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Hilton. I can go next, Celine, if you want.
Sure.
Yeah. My name is Maria Pia Intini. I am Development and Investment Director for Europe at Citizen M Hotels, a Dutch-based vertical player. We invest, develop, and operate Citizen M Hotels across the world, where sustainability is definitely at the forefront of whatever we do, being long-term investors. So really happy to be here and share my knowledge.
So then it's me, I guess. So Willem van Bolderen, one of the founding partners of Studio Push, the architects. We're an architecture office based in Helsinki, and we specialize in hospitality, hotels, resorts, retreats, spas, both in the Nordics and other parts of the world. Like we have a strong focus on sustainability with our projects, and also on wood construction, which of course goes hand in hand with sustainability. That's also something that is close to my heart personally. I also teach wood architecture here at Helsinki University of Technology, nowadays called Aalto University.
And we have also Maribel Perez. I don't know, Maribel, if we can hear you now or not. But she's working with a lot of hotels, including independent hotels, on helping them be more sustainable. I don't know if we can hear her. Okay, so if Maribel, if you can connect, we can have your intro whenever you're ready. Okay, so what does it mean and take to build sustainable hotels? So where do we start with that topic? That's kind of a broad, like what's come first, like the construction, the materials, the planning, there's so much in there.
I think it would anyway be good to split it in two parts, maybe. So there's the operations, and then there's the buildings itself. So that would be the first part to cut it. The brands, of course, always focus on operations, but the embodied carbon from construction and from the building itself also have a significant impact. But that's I think the first distinction. I don't know if somebody else wants to cut it down even further.
From my side, I throw in my 2 cents. From my experience, is you also have two elements in terms of the owner's mindset and the operator's mindset. So as we mentioned earlier when we were talking, you have certain properties who have a to Z book of how you need to do everything, and within that book or within that model, there's a sustainability element, or it's all core part of the sustainability. But if your owner or your investor is not in the same direction as you, it becomes very frustrating. I think a lot of us have hit that wall and had to get over that. So for me, I think from the beginning point, there has to be a synergy between what the owner wants and what the operator expects. Then it goes into construction, of course. So, from my experience.
You would have like before, like William had construction and operations, and you actually would have like one step before that, which is either like brand values or vision or concept, and that would lead to, okay, we have the sustainability means that to us. How can we implement that into construction and then translate it into operations?
I think
Yeah.
And
Hilton's
if I-
distinction. Sorry, Maria,
No,
go.
Willem, just to add like one step back, I think one extra specification we can make within, for example, the investment community. I think it's fair to say that nowadays there is still a different approach, whether you are a short-term investor, more opportunistic investor versus a long-term investor. And then, of course, if we then had to go to the split between ownership and operations, the moment where you have an owner operator, so a holding effectively having under its umbrella both the real estate asset and the operations, then of course that the diatriba, that you know, that the dilemma is no longer there, because clearly the interests are aligned, which is also why one of the reasons, not the only reason, but definitely one of the reasons why more and more you see investors buying operational platforms. But we can go into the details of this later on. But Hilton, no, sorry, Willem, I think I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, actually, I think Hilton and also Maria Pia added to it now. I think that actually that division is also indeed important, because if you think of construction, it's only typically taken into account during the moment of construction, and then the operation agreement or the operations, they kind of continue for the next 20, 40, 50 years, and a building needs to be updated. So if the paperwork or the agreements don't have that kind of forward thinking and sustainability built in, it will be very hard. So then you get a discrepancy between the owner and the operator as to how to take it forward. So that's very important, because a building that is now up to standard will be outdated at some point. So we need to do properties that constantly develop and become better over time. And if that's not figured out beforehand, it will be very hard to do afterwards. And that's maybe yet another distinction: existing building stock and building stock that is still to be built. That's yet another division that you could bring in when you think about sustainable hotels, how to do it to existing building stock and how to do it for the ones that are still to be realized.
I mean,
One thing
go ahead, Celine.
No, I remember one time we had a conversation with Willem, and I remember you mentioned having like a kind of retrofitting like strategy for sustainability, and starting from, okay, what ideal looks like, and then from there, like going backwards and say what's feasible and not feasible, and what are like things that we really want to focus on, and things that are like that we don't need, or things that you know, like if you have to sacrifice certain things, like going backwards helps, like focusing on what's important versus what's less important, and like still implementing as much as possible. Because I was wondering, you know, as we were talking, like do we have an example today, like of 100% sustainable hotel, and what would that look like? And if that's not possible, like realistically possible today, like how can we approach it to have like the best version possible, taking into consideration all the constraints that we can have, which can be multiple. It can be financials, it can be like social, like political, the climate, the, I don't know, whatever factors are in this specific location for this specific property that are impacting the fact that it can't be 100% sustainable.
Yeah. No, and you're right, because no property is the same, especially when we talk about existing building stock, and no location is the same either. So, for example, in a historical building in the city center, to start insulating a building like that would ruin its visuals, it would create moisture problems, etc. So you cannot say that, for example, brand A is going to improve insulation on all their properties, because it would make sense to do it to some, but it might not make sense to do it to others. And it's again also what do we call sustainable? Because sustainable, you could say, is over the lifespan of 50 or 100 or 200 years of a building, or is sustainable everything that helps us stay below the 1.5% temperature increase? And they both will mean a different building, actually. Because the 1.5 degrees building out of cardboard might be the best choice, whereas if we say a sustainable building over 200 years, other materials come into play. So these decisions are like the assessment in the beginning, and the targets, or what are we trying to achieve, are already like the starting point for all those decisions. And there's no one linear answer. And of course, they've been trying to capture that through standardization or certification, like BREEAM or LEED. But we've also seen that sometimes creates false incentives in a way, or actually result in decisions that are not necessarily sustainable, but do the opposite, just to kind of get the maximum amount of points, or to become gold or platinum standard. So it's very hard. But then again, Maria-Pia probably is able to elaborate more on that. But as an investor, I also do understand that you don't believe the architect on his on his nice thoughts that this is going to be good. You also want to make sure that the extra money that you put into a property, that you'll get that out of it someday if you sell the project forward, or that extra investment is not lost. And then a standard or a certification actually does help to guarantee that, okay, I paid 20% more, but if I sell it, I also get 20% more. Like that's so. I don't know. Do we want to narrow the subject in the next hour, or do we want to talk about all these? But it's yeah, it's a super interesting topic, and there's no one answer.
I think it's very interesting, especially from the perspective of an architect, or the person putting the building together, and from my perspective, from an operator's perspective, because when we think about sustainability, especially from the construction perspective, it's how many things can we put in place to reduce carbon footprint, to support the local community, those kinds of elements. But again, from an investment perspective, it's fine and good putting in a solar system that costs so much money, and you get, like you said, goodie points on your evaluation through one of the companies for your sustainability element, but it's not going to last for 10 years. We all know that. You're going to have to replace the batteries. So from a financial sustainability perspective, it's actually not worth it. And that's why there's a lot of conflict with owners as well. But from an operator's perspective, we can say, oh, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. We shortened the supply chain of the products. They all come locally, blah, blah, blah. We've used wood as much as possible versus these type of things, insulation, maintaining heat, so you don't have to. So all those elements are put into a building to make us look good from a marketing perspective and from getting points, like you said, goodie points. But I still remain optimistic, because any direction or anything we do, even by having this conversation, is definitely a step in the right direction. It may be commercial, it may be more financial, but at the end of the day, doing something is better than doing nothing. But I think globally, I could be wrong, Willem can correct me here, but I think globally, the way things are made nowadays, and the construction and the products are generally more with an international mandate towards sustainability, because it's very, very much mainstream. And I think a lot of governments are now, not just doing this because they want to get voted in next year. They have absolutely no choice. It was interesting in another conversation we had last year, is that in America, they're very far behind, and they don't get the pressure from the government to do sustainability. It was very interesting to hear that. But I think definitely from a European perspective, and maybe Asia also a little bit behind, but you have to do it. You have no choice. So that definitely helps. But where and how and what and for how much, yeah, that's definitely a very, very broad topic, like you said.
Well, and hospitality is unique, of course. Like a hotel consumes a lot of energy, because it's the square meters are heavily used. There's a lot of guests also. water consumption, energy consumption is very high. And the nice thing is that because of technology, awareness, etc., operational emissions have gone down a lot. And so that's really in the right direction. It is also like if you have the total emissions that a building has, so operations plus construction, if one of them percentage-wise goes down, it also means that the impact of the other part proportionally becomes bigger, which is the building itself and the energy that is the embedded carbon in that part. So it also means that the shift that has for years and years been on operations is slowly moving towards the building itself and the carbon that is embodied in the building itself, which is a nice shift, because if we can make the same leap that we did in operations and also do it on the construction part, then we really get somewhere. The problem is, though, and this is a little bit like when we talk about the 1.5 degrees, so trying to cap the temperature rise on the planet, is that it's an absolute number. That's the amount of CO2 that you can emit to hit 1.5 degrees, and we're pretty close to that. So basically, we're going really steep up, and we're going to hit that ceiling of maximum CO2 that we can emit. Typically, to make a building better, to make it more energy efficient, it means that we have to invest carbon to make a better building, which actually drives us even closer to that 1.5 degrees. So if that's our goal, it might sometimes be better to not do anything, because like the more we renovate buildings, the more we emit and get closer to the ceiling. And we're only going to get that back later on, because then we are flattening that curve because of less emissions, which, of course, in our mind, that's the right way to do it, because you want to make durable buildings that last a long time, that use very little energy. But it's the same as with a car. Should you buy a new electric car, or do you keep on driving with your old car? What's the right thing to do? And that also goes a little bit with building. So that's why, Celine, you asked that earlier, like what is really the right strategy? Make that calculation, sit down with the client, look at the property, and then make the right choices. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruits that have huge impact. And of course, those are the no-brainers that we should do. But it gets a bit more difficult once all the low-hanging fruits have been picked. And then we have to really choose. And it doesn't really, like here in Finland, for example, heating is an issue, because yesterday it was -23. So clearly a lot of energy goes towards heating. And then you can say, okay, either I insulate the building really well, so I need little energy to heat it, or I look for a heat source, like, for example, geothermal heat. So I'm drilling down the rock a few hundred meters and I take heat out. So then I have a heat source that requires very little energy, and that's one other way to heat it. Investment-wise, it doesn't really make sense to maybe do both, because both of them are really expensive, and I need already very little energy once I insulate the building. So, like, what is the strategy of the property? What is the most suited? And then make wise decisions in a way. So you don't have to tick all the boxes. You might want to overachieve in some to kind of compensate for others. But can we do a sustainable building, 100% sustainable? I think yes, we can.
Do you have like a threshold, like if the building is above, I don't know, 100 rooms, this solution is better than the other solution? Or there are so many, like, because you were mentioning certifications and the like standardization of sustainability and trying to have some rules, but is it realistically like feasible or even like a good idea to create those rules, because you can actually, like, when you do calculations, say, okay, like over 100 rooms is better this than that, or there are actually like so many different factors that impact the, like, what decision is the best decision, that it's really like a one, like, case by case thing to look at.
It's a case by case, I would say, to look at, but in general, and this is more my personal opinion than that it's but low tech is always better than high tech. So if there's a low tech solution for a problem, do that, because it's more durable, it's longer lasting, and it's foolproof in a way. And then only once that is not sufficient enough, then move into a more high-tech tier. But then it's much more sensitive. It's more sensitive to maintenance, to know-how, etc. And we really see a tendency that everybody jumps straight to the high-tech solutions of a building. So instead of lowering the water consumption and the heating, to instead put EV panels on the roof and first low tech and then high tech. But of course, with certain properties, there's not that much low tech improvements that you can make, and then you have to move towards the high tech. But low tech, I would say, like a building is like might stand 100, 200, 300 years. So we shouldn't only think of the here and now. We should also think of the lifespan of the building, and even beyond the hotel that is there now, beyond the operator that is there now, and what solution would last that lifespan, or would be easy to replace within that lifespan if it cannot last that long. So those are decisions that are not that measurable in a way in a certification, but have a significant impact on the property.
May I
go ahead, Maria?
Yeah, thank you. No, I would like to add some. Yeah, we are. Sorry, back. So I would like to add some comments to the points that have been raised so far. I mean, touched upon so far. Let's start from the certifications. Yeah, I can probably bring the view of an investor here. It is correct that, of course, they are also chosen as a way to confirm to the external world that there is a serious commitment towards building a sustainable, creating sustainable building. It's true, and because it's like having a certification, a business card from a well-known company or a well-known university. It clearly gives, without even questions asked, the certainty, the confidence that a building has been created according to certain standards. So for the preservation of value, for sure, these certifications are, have a meaning, have a say. They also give guidance, of course, to what needs to be done, because think about, you want to be sustainable, you want to create something sustainable. Where do you start? What do you do? Of course, following a protocol can help you going in that direction. I want to also say one extra thing. It is true, as I just said, that it's also for to give comfort about the sustainability, the effective sustainability of that building. But in reality, there can be also other side positive effects. So, for example, you might, after all, implement some, say, air conditioning system, which, after all, yeah, might cost a bit more money, but in reality lasts way longer. And we have examples in Switzerland where we have air conditioning system, which, for example, whose life, economic life, is around 30 years compared to similar products, so to alternative products, whose life is around 15, if it goes well, 20 years, with less maintenance required throughout the process. So, and by the way, also not to underestimate the impact that something a bit more expensive might have on your energy bill, because it's also something that has to be put into consideration. We discussed about things like solar panels or things going outside buildings. Well, I'm sure you have experience with the fact that not all, when you want to redevelop a building, and then you go to the public authorities and you say, oh, I want to put something on the roof of this building, which didn't have anything before. Maybe it's a historic building, or anyway, it's in a historic area. There's no chance. You might have all the most amazing, noble reasons why you want to do that. You want to save energy, you want to save the world. Well, in certain countries, they don't allow to have anything on the roof because it's visible from drones when you have like a nice view from the top, and they don't want to show a different building than what it was before. And sometimes they even require parking spaces because you're creating a hotel from whatever other use, which clearly doesn't really match with sustainability goals. But so it's also important to have these other things in mind, which as much as sometimes we have some great ideals, we also, as investors, you also need some time to suffer, or anyway to be creative, to walk around the limitations coming from other parties you have no control on. And yeah, I mean, I'll stop here, but I'm sure just to give I know that Hilton was talking before, but I have other topics. I'll raise them later on. Hilton, sorry, what were you saying before I started talking?
It's 100% correct what you say. It goes back to what we were saying before. It's where the money's coming from. It's what the government, the locals, the operator. There's a lot of fingers in the pie before you can just say we want to build a sustainable hotel. Unfortunately, when the groundwork is done from the beginning, all of these elements need to be considered.
Yeah. And I think it's easier to probably look at the inside. So, for example, I guess, yeah, solar panels are a great idea. If there is a limitation, maybe you try to reduce that electricity usage by looking the building inside, having say a smart building where you utilize sensors, automation, so lights and that turn on or off based on the presence of customers or not, and rooms that, for example, the moment you have a checkout in our rooms, when you check out and you go downstairs at the kiosk, you check out, well, automatically everything will, the light will go in that specific room, the light will go off, the blinds will go down, the temperature will set to the standard temperature in the hotel. So in other words, automatically, because of it's a smart building, automatically the building adjusts itself to consume as little energy as possible, because of course, what thanks to technology. Technology was also mentioned before, and having advanced building management systems can definitely help controlling the usage of electricity, water consumption, and all these things that effectively allow you contribute at least to have a sustainable building from the inside.
Phenomenal point. I mean, you can build with an incorrect material, but if you monitor it from within inside, I'm just thinking of some of the hotels that I've worked in that are buildings, and hey, we all know they leave the key card in. The housekeeping team has an extra key card to make sure, and then half an hour before the guest arrives, we put the key card in to make the room the right temperature if it's heat or it's cold. But what you're saying, the blinds coming down, the room going to a normal temperature, stripping water gets switched off, the geyser or the heater comes off, and boom, within a month, a year, you've done X amount of carbon saving, energy saving, financial saving. It's a dream. And we are definitely getting there, but those are not the elements we consider. We consider about using bamboo, we consider about, all these kinds of things, but all of that together definitely makes a sustainable hotel. And from a construction perspective, everything needs to be considered in the beginning, and we don't always consider that. We are more and more considering that. And yes, you're right, the tools out there are phenomenal. There's some fantastic tools out there.
Yeah, like Celine, you started like, can we build a truly sustainable hotel? And then again, what do we measure for that? And there's several stages that, like, what do you include in the calculation? So is it only operations? Is it also the impact of the hotel on the community on a bigger part? Do you include the building itself? So there's multiple layers, and actually there's a certain standard for it, like how big do you want, how many layers do you want the onions to have? And but if we take them one at a time, for example, operations, I think depending on the location of a building, it's definitely possible to have a zero emission or a climate neutral or emission neutral building. That means that all the energy that you consume, you also have to generate or then somehow offset. And I think you can even do it without offsetting. Again, depending on the location, if you don't have a huge heating or cooling load, but you're in a moderate climate, then it can be done. To generate all that energy, for example, with the PV panel, you also have to kind of think, of course, of the emissions that PV panel embodies to kind of build. So then you go to the bigger picture of the building itself with all the technology itself. And then you have to kind of compensate for that carbon. That can be, for example, through the use of wood in a construction, because that's storing the carbon in a way. The trees have captured that carbon during their lifetime. Then when you fall the tree, basically, if it would rot in the forest, it would release that carbon again. But if you store it inside a building, you actually prolong the release of that carbon. Of course, eventually the building will be taken down and then releases it. But if you can store that carbon for 100, 200 years, that really helps with climate change. However, it needs a hell of a lot of wood to compensate for all the carbon that is otherwise going to the other elements in the building. So you will have to think of it a little bit bigger, that can you store the carbon in another way, for example, through planting forests or other elements. To do that all within one property, it's not that it cannot be done, but on a lot of locations, I think it will be very difficult to achieve. On, like, for example, a resort that has less structure, lighter construction, it will be doable. But on an urban hotel, without going full on with massive timber and other decisions, it will be hard to do. However, of course, if you think of Hilton is working for Banyan Tree. You could think, do you have to do it one property at a time, or could you spread it over your whole property? Some of the properties are easier to do it than others. So in average, it might be easier to achieve. Or if you think of a city, should a hotel try to solve it all by itself, or is it something that you can do in a neighborhood scale? So for example, when in combination with offices and housing, for example, they have different energy needs at different times. So there's a certain efficiency of working together. So maybe we shouldn't think like one building or one property at a time, but take it a bit wider, because that's one other way, I think, to reach efficiency, is to do it at scale. And solutions at scale tend to be more efficient and have a higher impact. Also, the buildings in urban locations tend to last much longer, because they keep their value. Let's say in the city center of Rome or Bangkok, the properties will last longer because there's always a need for those square meters. Whereas if you build somewhere in the countryside, if that operator ceases to exist, it might be that a hotel is abandoned, and then you have to think of the aftermath of that building. Like, can it be moved, or what else could it be in the future if it's not going to be a hotel or a property anymore? So a lot of things to take into play, but it's like, how big do you want? How many layers do you want the onion to have? Like biodiversity, for example, is that also part of sustainability? So that might go against PV panels or other decisions. It's I think nobody has the full grasp on it, and it doesn't make sense to try to do everything for the full 100. It's really about choosing one direction and sticking to that direction, and really make an impact. And one important part that doesn't show up in any of these measurements is, I think, the educational aspect of a property on the guest. So if you have an inspirational hotel where you've stayed at that really explains the beauty of the site, the difficulty of generating energy either through PV or hydro or otherwise, you might enlighten or educate the guests who will make changes in their life and maybe at home as well, inspired by the property where they stayed at. And then the impact of a hotel can be much more than that one night that the guest stayed there. It might actually save energy throughout the life of a client.
Fascinating.
Sorry for the monologue.
No, amazing. Fascinating perspective, because from an operator's perspective, like I said in the beginning, from an architectural, an investment, and an operating perspective, yeah, we don't see it the same way. No, fascinating information. I think you got your answer, Celine. We don't know. There's so much to do.
And also,
Yeah.
like, even if you pick one topic, Celine, sorry, just to finish, like, response to Willem, even if you pick one specific topic, you say, oh, I don't know, I want to, whatever I do, I want to try to reduce the carbon emission. There are also different ways you can do it. If it's like choosing certain, like, for example, doing modular construction that allow, in theory, would help you having less less carbon emission, or you say, oh, I actually want to focus on something like my F&B produce comes from next door, from the things so I don't have I don't produce carbon, I don't emit carbon by having the food produced coming from very far away and being produced who knows where. So effectively there are, even if you choose, in other words, the thing you want to do specifically, there is really a variety of options you can achieve that with.
Yeah. And I think, Maria-Pia, you had a really good point. Like, we cannot know everything about everything. So the standards or certification helps with kind of reaching the baseline on all the parts that you decide not to focus on. So in that sense, there's really a place for certification, because they really help to kind of make sure that the baseline, or even the baseline, is raised on all these topics. The same goes for places on this planet where the legislation is not very tough. So then the certification helps to kind of put that baseline in place. But then to excel somewhere, then you really need to dive deep, and I think that also requires a bit of love from the owner, from the operator, and a bit of commitment. Because I think it's not only to do it perfectly now; it's also to say that, okay, now we're gonna reach this much. Next year we again do it 10% better, and then the year after we do it again. So it's a journey where you just try to improve and improve, and technology is getting better. Our know-how gets better. The feedback loop that a building can give us, so through the use of sensors, we can kind of learn about the guest. And the first year we don't know everything, but the second year we've learned from the guest and can react to it and improve. And I think both Hilton and Maria-Pia mentioned that already. With the existing buildings, there's so much improvement just through better use, or actually in a way better use by the guest or by the staff, without actually having to change anything, just by kind of learning, turning the lights off either automatically or predicting when guests will need heat, etc., how elevators are used. So finding efficiency just by the flow of energy, by learning from the guest. And most buildings are still pretty stupid as that everything is at full blast 24/7, no matter if there's guests or not.
Yeah.
Very true.
And I think also there are some mindset that are a bit stupid too, like when you go to a hot country and their aircon is like freezing, and it's like, like it's counterproductive, it's bad for the environment, everybody's freezing, like why are you doing that? And there are still some some small mindset shift that needs to be done to like having a hotel where it's 10 degrees inside doesn't show it's a luxury. It's more luxurious. Actually, it's kind of freezing everybody, and it doesn't serve anyone.
But it's an interesting part, because at home you pay the energy bill for your aircon or for your heating, and then there's an incentive to do so. In your room rate, you're not being punished or rewarded for behaving, or then misbehaving, and maybe there's and of course that would be really bad. That, can I check out, by the way, here's another 50 euros because you took a shower of 45 minutes. Like, I don't know, that nobody's gonna do that. But are there other ways how you could? No, but like, of course, there's little notes always, like, don't throw put the towel back on the hook, something like this. But are there maybe other ways that we can motivate people to do their bit, and I don't know, without patronizing the guests, but in a way educating the guests a little bit as that the impact that it has. And I don't know, Hilton, I see rice fields behind you, but on some places it might be really hard to get fresh water, for example, and then I think you can really ask the guest that, okay, it's okay to take a shower, etc., but be aware that to get this amount of clean water, we had to put this and this much amount of effort in it. So let's try to all limit it, or like, I don't know.
It's a very, very difficult line. We're obsessed about guest experience. We're obsessed about people being happy and giving us good comments and providing the best service possible. But at the same time, as we said before, there's definitely this awareness, and I think you mentioned it, Willem, in terms of education and people, especially in our brand, and some other famous brands like Six Senses, for example, they take pride in letting people know where the water came from and what they went through to purify the water and how much grey water they used. And your vegetables come from our garden, and it becomes a marketing effect, and it's also an education. Just to add, you were telling guests not to have a shower, save some water. I read an article, maybe you guys have already heard about it. In Las Vegas, there's some hotels that are fining people who are taking too much food in the buffet and not finishing it. So actually, I read about this and I thought this is phenomenal. Because I mean, I sit in my hotel and we have many buffets, and I watch people just, I call it BS, the buffet syndrome, and then you just pile up your plate and because it's there. And the people don't finish their food. And then as they check out to pay or whatever, pay their drink bills or whatever, and they go, actually, you didn't finish. It's an extra $15. Next time, finish your plate. Hey, why not?
Can we help, I am like with the work I'm doing with the blue zones, like there's one thing about the 80% rule, which is eating until you're 80% full. And one trick to do that is to use smaller plates. So because you're using smaller plates, you tend to like pile it less. So are there tricks that we can use also for guests, like when you serve, like when you're serving food buffet style, maybe using smaller plates, so people, like once they're finished their plate, if they really want more, they can go back. But if you give them a big plate, then they're just gonna put like everything they want in their big plate. And the same with drinks, like if you have these huge glasses, like they're gonna tend to go full and not finishing it. So maybe like and that's also actually like something about the philosophy of Blue Zones, is shaping the environment to help people make the healthy choice the easy choice. So how can we also help create an environment where guests make the sustainable choice the easy choice? And instead of them seeing that as making an effort, we are kind of led to do that, because that's the easier option for them. Like maybe like switching on the light is more, when I don't know, like when you, if they had to make an extra effort to do the unsustainable thing, they probably won't do it and stick with the sustainable thing. So how can we use this trick to lead people to do the sustainable thing?
But
10
of
years
course,
ago, if we were telling people, 10 years ago in the hospitality business, if we were telling people you cannot have fresh towels every day, and if you don't need to change your sheets, we won't do it. And everyone, I'm sure the executives at Marriott and everyone were like, are you out of your mind? Guest experience, guest experience, guest experience. Now it's a given. Everybody has that little thing in the room or the video. Only if you need to change, we save the environment. It's almost a given, right? And it's accepted by the guests at very high-end hotels as well. So there's definitely hope. It's just up to us to educate the people and implement that. Of course. I like that 80%. And smaller plates is lower food cost, by the way.
But it requires an effort from our end, I would say, because the industry is a little bit like stooled on abundance. So a buffet where you can just, I don't know, eat till you explode, shower till you explode. A bigger room is a better room, is the standard kind of. And then if you have a smaller room and it's a crappy room, then you kind of even confirm that that's true. So if we go the other way, then we have to do a better job and design better rooms and design a better breakfast. And then if the alternative is better, I'm sure we get everybody on board. But that's like, of course, it fits better to some brands better than others. But we have to still make that shift, and I don't think it's still really happening. Actually, like it's still. I don't know, most of the attempts are pretty sad or marginal if you think about it, and that really shift. And maybe it is easier to try it as a new brand and position yourself differently, but I think we should compensate with quality and lasting quality when it comes to the buildings, when it comes to the design, when it comes to our food, for example. So if you tell the story, if it's local or if it's not local, that's also fine. But if there's a philosophy about it and you take the guest on that journey, I'm sure everybody will sign up to it. But if you ask somebody beforehand, what do you choose? Everybody will pick the 60 square meter room over the 20 anytime, no matter like if that 20 square meter room is not fantastic. So still a long way to go, I think. And therefore, like, I don't know if there should be a financial incentive or then just government oversight or some sort of like CO2 tax to kind of like stimulate it on that sense as well, because otherwise we'll be too late to stick to the 1.5 degrees. People, like whole swathes of this world, will have to move or be flooded, etc. So we really have to move fast, and we cannot wait till it's a good time to do something. Like we need to change now, and it needs to go faster than what we do now. I think we're beyond the don't throw your towel on the floor.
Yeah.
We're talking about it, right?
Although
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
the one thing we should do better, though, for sure, is educating customers about, we were mentioning this before, what it takes to do certain things, especially in certain destinations. So really bring them to the journey and let them understand the problem for real, and let them feel part of the solution by doing something, how much they contribute to make this world better. I think it's unfair to just ask, oh yeah, don't do this or don't do that, without providing the bigger picture, because nobody would feel really engaged to do so unless it's like working in a team, right? If you're asked by a colleague to just do something without really knowing what is that for, what kind of issue is going to solve, and therefore what problem is going to solve, and therefore what outcome you can achieve if you do that together. But same with the guests. They have to be, which is why, for example, more and more hotels, at least hotels want to be really sustainable, are very good at sharing also the sustainable results. What really informing, by doing X, that's what you're contributing to, and that's what we're doing with that saving. Saving for the sake of saving also, it's not fair enough. Like it's good to, for example, say, okay, if you don't clean your room, if you don't ask to have your room clean, well, part of the money will go to this foundation to do this thing. So it's not just that I save money as an operator and then I make my profit richer, thicker. No, it's not just that. You help me do something great. You are part of this beautiful action towards the world. So I think we have to do better doing that, first of all. And then maybe for other people, maybe sanctions at some point will come into place.
Yeah. No, that's really right. And well, it's a strange example, but I'm now in Helsinki, and here we use 90 liters per person per day in our family, which is, I think, a little bit below the average, but anyway, still quite a lot of liters. And then we have a summer house, which is off-grid, and I have to get the water from the well, and I have to walk 200 meters with those buckets. So I don't want to walk too often. And then I have to heat it with a fire and in the sauna and heat the water. And that bucket, that 10 liter of warm water, is so nice. That's so nice. After you've carried it, you've lit the fire, and it feels like a spa experience. So it's so much nicer than standing under the shower without like just turning the tap and let the thermostat do the thing. So I think like less can be much better. And of course, the question is, you cannot, like, how many of those events do you want during your stay? If you have to get your water for the shower and then forge your food and cook it yourself and then clean the bathroom afterwards yourself, that, like, it's probably too much to ask. But again, if you pick one topic for a property where it's really about, I think you can ask that extra effort, and it can actually make all the difference. And the one thing that you remember, that sauna was so good, or that 10 liters of water was so good. But so in one weekend, we with 3 people, we used 60 liters of water at the summer house, just because I don't feel like carrying more. And good. It's enough.
Correct, it's enough. That's the key. It's actually enough, because it comes too easy, right? Yeah.
It's, like for Christmas, a friend of mine bought me this book. It's called The Magic, and it's about gratitude. And there are like different, gratitude challenges. And I think like what's tied to what we were discussing is that we really take for granted a lot of the things that comes automatically to us. Like you were mentioning the shower, like you turn the button and you have the warm water coming, but it required someone to install the pipes for the water to come, and like someone who to set up the heating system, and like it required so much stuff. Like the same with eating, it requires planting the grains for the tomatoes, taking care of the tomato for it to grow, having someone to collect it, to transport it from the ground to the farmer's market, and then to collect it and cook it. Like there are so many different steps, and like helping people to realize all these different steps and actually what services we're paying for. We're not just paying for like a room, but there are so many different elements that goes into that and into that experience. And yeah, like that's actually what makes the difference, and what makes the difference also. If you take like food is an easy subtopic to compare things, but if you take the difference between I don't know, like a fast food hamburger and another like a homemade hamburger, it's kind of the same. It's the same. It's still an hamburger, but the I don't know, the quality of the food you have, the nutrients you have, the you're paying for that quality. And as Willem said earlier, it's this question of quality versus quantity, and like what are you paying for, and what are you willing to pay for, like, and what are you exactly getting. And I think that for a number of years, because of this abundance like mindset that we were talking about, hotel chains were shy to explain like what they were doing and why, etc. But now like it starts to be seen as a value, and actually like this helps show like this is the added value you're having because we're going through all these steps. Yes, maybe it's a little bit more expensive, but this is what you're getting. Versus if we were not going through all these steps, the quality would be lower. And these educational aspects, yeah, I think it's key. And for all the stakeholders, it's not only to the final guest, but I think there's also value in education for employees, because I think we were talking about that last time, like there were those certain standards that employees have about what they need to do. We were talking about the towels, but some employees were, even if it said that if we only change the towel if you put it in the bathtub, for example, there are still employees who will collect them and to clean them even if they're not in the bathtub, because they think it's the value of their job to provide like clean towels for guests. So yeah, there's education at every stages of the spectrum.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Mm,
Great.
but what's next? That's kind of the question. Like what like we all agreed that it's too wide of a topic or too many unknowns. But I think people are watching this or re-watching this to get some answers. Do we have answers?
I definitely think we've hit a lot of elements and a lot of food for thought, and looking at it from different spaces and different ideas and different values. I think yeah. For me personally, and I've been in the game for a long time, and I'm passionate about this. I've learned a lot from this conversation. So I think that there's definitely value. Yes, we don't have an ABC, definitely not, but we definitely have quite an alphabet.
Yeah.
Well, and the good thing is that next month we have another call, and the topic is how can hotels reconcile people, planet, and profit. So I guess we will have even more answers, like continuing our conversations.
We have definitely provided some tools and a place where to start from. Not a clear answer, but I would say, I mean, not the magic portion, for sure not, but definitely lots of tools that can be used to make buildings more sustainable. From a more
And I really
environmental
like,
perspective, a social perspective as well. We touched actually that could be another session, but that is also another way to make buildings more sustainable.
and I really like what we said at the beginning is that actually a lot of people think that it starts on construction, but I think it's important to take that step back and say what's important for me, what sustainability means for me, for my building, for my brand. And a lot of time, and I see that in my work with clients who come and they already have plans, and it's like, okay, you have plans, but you don't really know what your brand essence is. So it's like, I think that the construction and the architecture side shouldn't be step one. I think step one should be let's think of what we want to build, and then we can go to architecture and construction with a better idea and have something more in line with what sustainability means to that particular owner brand project.
Yeah. No, I agreed. Like a brief in the beginning with the goals already set before you start construction is important. And for example, if you think of some like the efficiency of a building envelope, or like often it's already all defined and then we come in, whereas kind of a more compact building would be much more efficient, or other decisions. So I think defining some things much more and leaving other things much more open will lead to better choices. And then I would say when it comes to design and construction, it's coming to the legislation within Europe, and worldwide as well, is like the life cycle analysis is in a way a very good tool, I would say, because it's not only looking at construction, it's also looking at the use and also at the afterlife of the product or the building as well. So of course, there's a lot of holes to shoot at it, but it's a good way to start and kind of think of all the topics that it's a circle. We should think of everything. And we have responsibility beyond the here and now, and that's what a life cycle analysis is all about. So if that's one of the tips of the day, do that before you start the project rather than doing it afterwards to get your certification, because then your choices have a true impact in the beginning.
Right. Well, thank you so much. Any last word, or we're leaving Willem with the last word with is great. It's great wrap up.
Master Willem, yes.
Do I have to wrap something up now? No.
Very good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone. That was a very interesting conversation, as always, I would say. I hope it would help people who are listening to have a little bit more clarity, and can still comment on the videos or ask questions or even contact us or join next call. Like if you're attending the calls live, you can also ask questions on the go. So feel free to do that.
Actually, there's one thing that I don't know, we could ask from the people looking this back, or commenting on it later on, and that's like, if somebody has a solution, people typically want to keep it like in their inner pocket and not willing to share it because it's a unique advantage. And I think it would be nice if all of this would be much more in a way open source. So solutions, best practices, findings are shared and data is shared. So because a building it has too much of an impact to experiment with it. So if we can learn from the neighbor, from colleagues, from other brands, that would be great, because then the learning curve is quicker than the life cycle of one building and only react to that, or only after 10-20 years when the first renovation is coming up. So that's towards architects, contractors, but also operators, in a way that don't only publish the nice figures, but also the things where you failed, and make that part of the report. And I think that honesty also towards the guests, like, this is the things we tried, these are the things that worked, these are the things that didn't work. I think people can only appreciate that honesty rather than only showing the glamorous cool stuff that you've done. And this would be also a nice stage or podium to kind of share those, like, not only good examples, but also the things that where you learned and you realized it didn't work. So that might be like, let's all be vulnerable and willing to learn in a way, and kind of accept that it's something that we don't know, but we know more next year, and we again know more in 2 years. So that would be really nice to kind of, as a community that has the same goal, that everybody would join into that learning curve.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Thank you.
See you
all.
next month. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Great. Thank you everyone. That was a really